have funky lighting, but we are going to talk about breastfeeding today. I have been breastfeeding. I breastfed my first for 15 months, and I've been breastfeeding my second for just over 9 months. We're almost at 10 months. Wow, he's old. And I have learned some things about myself about breastfeeding. And just in general, I get a lot of questions about breastfeeding, about pumping and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make a video talking about everything in my experience breastfeeding and everything that I could possibly give in terms of information, details, or anything that I thought might be helpful, or just interesting tidbits so that, if you feel that way or if you had that experience, you comment down below, let me know. If there are any questions I didn't answer in this video that you would like to hear, please also comment those below and I would love to answer them for you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the initial latch, right? The very beginning, starting breastfeeding. When I was in the hospital, or not in the hospital, when I was in the birth center with my first, we were there for a little bit. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours after he was born total. After the golden hour, the first hour where they're like on your chest doing their thing, that time goes by so fast, by the way. Crazy. Which does help your milk come in and all that kind of stuff and your supply, and sometimes you'll have a baby do what's called the newborn crawl or newborn scooch, where they kind of like scooch themselves up to your breast so that they can latch. With my first, he did not latch at all initially. So he started off like he would open his mouth and like I could put my nipple into his mouth, but he was not closing his mouth to actually suckle. He was just like holding it in his mouth for like another hour after. So maybe it was like 2.5 hours, something like that. Then we used a little bit of donor milk and I had him latched, but obviously not latched because he wasn't fully latched, just with his mouth open. We like dribbled some milk right into his mouth and then he closed and latched and suckled and we were good. They gave me a couple little like tiny little droppers, like the ones they give micro preemies, full of donor milk, and we're like, try not to use this, but if he has a hard time continuing to latch moving forward, then feel free to use it. Well, I got really panicked. I think we used it one other time, one night when he wouldn't sleep. This is before we decided to co-sleep with him. But that was like initially in the hospital. After that, he latched just fine. First couple of days were fine, and I had heard that breastfeeding hurts, okay? So the second thing that I did to help, well, the first thing that I did to help, but the second thing about breastfeeding I want to talk about is preparing your nipples. Sounds odd, but what I did is I took a nipple balm. I had gotten gifted one, but I also got one that was edible, like babies could eat it, from the midwives. And so I used that one because it said on there, like, safe for babies to eat, safe to apply before and after latching. The other one didn't say that. It just said, like, soothes nipple cracks and pains or whatever. And I found that when I put the nipple balm on prior to latching and after latching, it helped the pain of the chafed nipples to like go away or not be there. And then eventually I didn't need it at all. I used it for the first like 2 weeks because that's how long everyone said to use it. With my second, I maybe used it for a week until I was calloused again and it was fine. But just from the start, I never had any pain with the actual like latch and the feeling of like my nipples hurting with my second. I only had a little bit of that with my first, but I used that nipple balm pretty much religiously and totally took care of that problem. So find a good edible nipple balm that you can put on before and after latching, and that will totally help the chafed nipples thing. The third thing that you like encounter or talk about is a couple days after your baby is born, usually. Sometimes it happens before, but not usually. You have letdown. The first letdown, when your milk first comes in, those first like 5 days, I would say, for both of my kids were really, really painful. And it was like out, out, out. Like you feel it up in the muscle tissue up here in the upper part of your breast. Which was really interesting to me. It wasn't like the nipple itself or like my boob itself. It was like the upper part, because that, you know, where the milk production is going down through your breast into your nipple. From what I gather, that's why it felt like that. So, it makes sense when you think about it. But that did really hurt. There was nothing I could really do to make that pain better or go away that I found. So if you have suggestions on how to make that like letdown pain go away or like to relieve it or any of that kind of stuff, that would be super helpful. One thing I did end up doing was using a heating pad. I did that with my second because I needed it for after birth contractions the first couple of days, but it didn't seem to do much, so maybe I wasn't using it right or I needed a different kind or something like that. But from that point on, things go pretty well. One of the things that my midwife prepared me for, and so I say it went pretty well, but if you have no idea what to expect, it might be shocking or really super difficult or any of that kind of stuff, was they don't get really anything but colostrum for the first sometimes 3 or 4 days. That's okay. As long as they're emitting waste, they're fine, right? They have to have 1 dirty diaper and 5 wet diapers a day or something to that effect. As long as they're meeting that, they're getting enough, their body's fine. Because babies are meant to kind of like cleanse themselves in that like purge while they're getting the colostrum, which has all your vitamins, all of the minerals and stuff that they need fresh out of the womb, all the stuff that you can't really transfer to them the same way. And then once your milk comes in, then there's like this sweet spot for like usually a month is what I've had, 1 to 2 months at most. And then they go through a growth spurt where they're constantly nursing. Now my first was, I don't even know how to describe it, but he was nursing, he would latch, nurse for like 5 minutes, fall asleep, wake up after 5 minutes, and then repeat the process all day long, screaming if he wasn't nursing. And that wasn't just during his growth spurts, that was like all the time until he was like 6 months old. It was difficult, and I don't know if I made it out to be more dramatic than it was. Like, I made it worse by doing certain things or not doing certain things because I panicked, because I was a first-time mom, I didn't know what I was doing. Whereas with my second, he really followed the latch on one side, nurse for 30 minutes, latch on the other side, nurse for 30 minutes, sleep or do whatever for, I think it was 2 to 3 hours from the start. So he was like, apparently that's cluster feeding, right? Where they do one side, they nurse, they do the other side, they nurse. Versus one side and then the next time they do the other side, which is now what he usually does. As they got older, right? Once my oldest hit the 6-month mark, we went to food right away at 6 months, adding that into his diet. Initially, I had wanted to wait longer just because if they don't need to have the solids, it's better for them to be getting whole nutrients from your milk than trying to supplement the nutrients and adding in other things that there was just a lot. But because of the way that he was nursing and that constant, like, nurse, sleep, I could get nothing done. I just felt like a shell of a person. And for my own mental health, I was like, okay, let's see if the food helps, right? And it did a lot because it had, like, he could eat a lot at once without falling asleep because he was sitting up in the chair, he was engaged, doing it with his hands, versus, like, nursing just kind of by nature is a little bit more of like a, oh, this is so nice and relaxing kind of a thing. So it was a lot easier for him to stay awake, eat fully, and then nurse and go to sleep. Or nurse and then do the whole eating thing. But usually he nursed afterwards. With that, then he learned, oh, I can stay awake by doing X, Y, and Z for so long while I'm nursing, and then I can go to sleep after I've had enough food to feel full. For my second, because he didn't have the same nursing issues that my first did in terms of like, I eat for 5 minutes, then I unlatch, then I fell asleep, then I latch again, then I do this, then I do that. I was I just felt a lot better. I've talked about it in previous videos, but there wasn't any kind of learning curve, and thus his sleeping was better. We did start my second on foods around 6 months, but honestly, we like started him on foods, and then it was a week before he had any more, and then he had foods like once a week for the first month, and then I was like, okay, we should probably get moving on this. And now he eats really, really well, eats tons of food, he does a lot of snacks. He does not nurse nearly as much, so I would say my supply is lower in that regard, because he doesn't nurse nearly as much as he did before, or rather as long. He'll probably latch just as frequently, but won't nurse as long because he doesn't need it, because he's eaten other things. He is on the move more though, so just in general, he burns more calories, so he eats more. And the next thing that I want to talk about in terms of breastfeeding is supply. So with my first, I thought I had supply issues because of the way that he was nursing, how frequently he would latch and unlatch. I just thought that he wasn't getting enough. But again, because I was very prepared for that, as long as your babies are gaining weight, they're doing what they need to do in terms of wet and dirty diapers and all that kind of stuff, they're healthy. They might be fussy, but they're just trying to increase your supply, that kind of thing, and they will regulate on their own. So I really took that to heart, and I tried not to let that part get me down, although I was constantly concerned about my supply because I started pumping. And I will talk about pumping, but for some reason in my mind, I just kind of believed I had not a great supply because all I could do was provide for my baby. Well, that's all our bodies are meant to do. We're not meant to have an oversupply. Now, some people do, and that's totally natural, totally fine. But in general, having an oversupply is not common. It's also not, like, yeah, an oversupply is nice now that we have pumps and things like that, and we want to go places or whatever. But generally, in nature, like, you're only meant to feed your baby. With my second, as far as supply, I have been much less worried about my supply. I learned a lot about supply in general with my first and realized I had a normal supply and did not have to worry. But it did help to be able to have a little bit more success pumping. So I want to talk about that. First of all, with my first, I got a $20 pump because I had to pay. Like, you can get pumps through insurance, but they cost money if you have a deductible. I had a deductible. And yeah, it would have been gone once we had to pay the deductible for the birth, but it was still not money we had until after the birth, and we didn't have extra to spend at the time that I wanted a pump. So I went and my husband went and got me a cheap pump from Walmart, like a $30 one, and it worked fine for me initially. But what I've realized is it really is not as good as my other pump. It does not work as well, as consistently. It was frustrating. I had to be attached to the battery. I wanted stuff that was going to be, if it was going to be hands-free, it was going to be truly hands-free. Then, I know you're not supposed to do this, but I had a friend give me her old Medela pump, like the big bag. The only problem with that is you have to be plugged into a wall, so I really could not go anywhere, and there were very few places. With my second, I got a real hands-free pump. I got a Mom Cozy. I got the S7, I want to say. I did not get the Pro, but I got the S7, I believe. I could be wrong. It's been a really long time since I bought it. I think I bought it like last June. I also did get a Medela hand pump. I did use a Haka a little bit with my first. With my first, I found that I used it, it worked a little bit, and then I think user error stepped in, and it was hurting too much, or it wasn't doing anything. So I just assumed I missed my window, and was like, I'll try again next time. Tried the Haka from the beginning with my second, and I did not have success with it. It only pinched, it only hurt. I don't know what I was doing wrong, or it would fall off, like it would not stay on. So clearly I need to figure that out if I want to use it again. But I also don't have leaking issues. Like, lots of women use the Haka because they leak. In order to avoid that problem, they use the Haka while nursing to catch the letdown. After my first, having only the Haka and that to use, I really struggled with pumping in general, whether it was pumping when we were on vacation and my son was at home to keep my supply, or just trying to pump after my son had already nursed to build up like a stockpile. I was rarely successful to getting more than an ounce, which I then learned was pretty much normal and actually pretty good, because if you're producing enough for your baby and also producing an ounce at a time, that's considered an oversupply. A small one, but like a small one. The way that my son nursed, the 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off kind of thing. And then the longest I think he nursed, as he got older, was like 10 minutes, maybe 15. Because of that, I think that really affected how the pump was effective or not effective. It obviously worked to get the milk out, but I didn't pump for 5 minutes, stop, pump again for 5 minutes, stop, pump again for 5 minutes. So I couldn't get out as much as he was drinking because I wasn't spending all of my time nursing, which was the whole point. So with my second, I started from the beginning of doing a nurse on one side at night, pump on the other side that he didn't nurse on in the morning, and then nurse on that side after pumping. The past month, I'd say, I have not pumped in the morning. I've just nursed him right away or switched sides in the middle of the night, just because I've been busy, haven't been paying attention. But generally, I would get around 4, sometimes 5 ounces in the morning. With that method, I never got like a ridiculous amount. Like I never had like 8 ounces or like an overflowing pump and then I had to do it again. But I did have enough to like feel like I was keeping up my supply on that side at night, and then I tried to, switch sides. Again, I haven't pumped in a while. I really want to and need to, but I just haven't. I do have a lot of milk stockpiled though because of that. I think it's like 150 ounces or something like that. Yes. But generally a lot more successful. I feel a lot less demoralized by pumping. However, spilt milk still is one of the most upsetting things ever. Anyway, that is my everything breastfeeding video. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, anything that you want to express, be kind and share. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and then hit the bell down below so you can get notifications for when more videos come out. And we will see you next time. Say yay!
Love, Genevieve.